When was the last time you visited Chicago's free zoo? No, yeah, really. Lincoln Park Zoo is free. From outings with family and friends to a picture-perfect day spot, Lincoln Park Zoo is budget-friendly and great for all with many things to do. Even better, Lincoln Park Zoo has one of the largest zoo-based conservation and science programs in the country, and they run the nation's top zoo-based animal welfare science program. So, your visit makes an impact. This summer, visit the pride of Chicago, Lincoln Park Zoo. Go to lpzoo.org to plan your next visit to Chicago's free zoo. What's up, y'all? Have you heard about the latest hit from the Second City? It's called The Devil is in the Detours, and it's being hailed as gutsy by the Tribune and another crackerjack cast of talented, charismatic performers, clearly creative and a joy to watch by the Sun-Times. That was very visual and descriptive. This is the Second City's 112th main stage review, and it's a hilarious and unhinged descent into a dimension where chaos reigns. The show runs Tuesdays through Sundays at the Second City in Old Town. Grab your tickets now at secondcity.com and go on and join the fun. Today on CityCast Chicago, what happened to a large tent encampment near the United Center? Why do some far west side residents feel ignored by the DNC? And were you a part of Chicago's most popular group chat this week? Helping me break it all down from the Sun-Times, reporter Elvia Malagon and audience engagement specialist Ellery Jones. It's Friday, August 23rd. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago is talking about. Good morning, Elvia. Welcome to CityCast Chicago.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
And we are so happy to have you here. Ellery, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, no, we are glad to have both of you here. For people who might be new to CityCast Chicago, every Friday we bring in these amazing voices from across the city to talk about the stories they were following this week, but also, as with every episode, to get their good news as well. Before we jump into the big stories, obviously all week between the three of us and our colleagues, social circles, the DNC has been top of mind in some form or fashion. What's happening inside the convention, what's happening outside the convention, what's happening near these two sites, the McCormick and the United Center. But my question to you this morning is, what the hell are you going to do when this is gone? What is out there for you in the city that helps you relax, that helps you disconnect, that just helps you chill? Elvie, I'm going to start with you. What's the thing you're looking forward to?
I think I'm going to treat myself to an iced lavender latte from Jumping Bean, one of my favorite coffee shops in the city. Probably walk around the park, maybe the lakefront without seeing everything kind of guarded because of all the security perimeter. So yeah, just kind of feeling like we have the city back to ourselves.
I've passed Jumping Bean on my way to Giant Penny Whistle over in Pilsen before, but I don't think I've ever passed it when they were open. And so I'm going to need to go ahead in there because that sounded so refreshing. So good.
Yes, they take a lot of my disposable income.
Good to hear it. Ellery, what about you? What is something you are looking forward to after such a long week of nonstop coverage?
Yeah, I've been working until like 1 a.m. pretty much every day this week, so I haven't really eaten a proper breakfast.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. No, I've had some like cold croissants in the office, but my plan tomorrow is I've got the day off. I'm going to go to Rue on 55th Street. I'm going to get some breads. I'm going to walk to the lake. I'm going to sit at Promontory Point and enjoy not having to be around anybody talking about the Democratic National Convention.
I love that for you.
I love that for both of y'all. And I absolutely love going over to Rue and getting that shrimp and grits. And one of the reasons Ellery has been up till 1 a.m., I assume, is because this week you have been running, I'd argue, one of the most popular buzzing group chats in the city, and that was the Chicago Sun-Times DNC group chat, where I know it's been on my phone, and I've been getting updates about everything from protest movements, from schedules of speeches, from security perimeter maps, and we're going to get into what that work has looked like for you. But this episode, after a week of such headline coverage, we usually talk about the top stories at the start and then talk about these stories that don't get that much attention in our second segment. But I wanted to flip that a little bit. Elvia, I want to start with you and a story that has, in my opinion, truly been pushed to the periphery this week and the last month. And that is what happened with one of the largest tent encampments in the city off of Roosevelt and Des Plaines, some 2 miles from the United Center. You've been following this development throughout the summer. Can you tell us what you've learned over the last month and a half, 2 months?
Yeah, we were particularly interested in seeing what's going to happen to folks experiencing homelessness when all of these people come for the DNC, when this giant security perimeter gets put up. So we went around and tried to talk to as many folks as we could that were living in tent cities. And we quickly found out that, and this was back in July, that folks that were living at the pretty large tent city that was in Des Plaines and Roosevelt, they were told that basically the city was going to clear it off. And some of them were offered the ability to go to a nearby shelter at the Tremont Hotel, which is actually pretty downtown, kind of close to Water Tower. Some folks did take it. There was kind of mixed. Some people were happy, some were not. But some people, they're suspicious of the shelter system. They don't want to live in a shelter. So they kind of just basically left and wanted to live elsewhere. We revisited that place this week and saw that the city has installed this pretty large wrought iron fence. So it seems like it's not just for the DNC. It seems like permanently it's kind of the end of this tent city. We went to another encampment that's not that far away, near Canal Port and 19th, kind of under the Dan Ryan Expressway. And folks there told us that they kind of felt like the city wanted them to have a vacation from being homeless because the DNC was happening, but they have questions about what's going to happen afterwards. And we have questions about that too, especially because the city's contract for the Tremont shelter is really only through the end of this month.
Oh, wow.
So we're kind of hoping to see if folks do get placed in more long-term permanent housing or what ends up happening to them.
We have seen just in the last year, when the city comes in and clears out these tent encampments, it can be a very cruel, sort of dehumanizing process. Sometimes people return to find their things sort of completely gone, thrown away in nearby dumpsters. I know that there was signage and people were informed, but what did that actual clear out process look like?
Yeah, we were there that morning, me and my colleague, Lauren Fitzpatrick. And basically a lot of the residents had already known that this was happening. So that morning when we got there, there was like a bunch of city trucks lined up. There were folks that had already moved out from that encampment who came back to help other people get their belongings. There were 2 women that were like frantically trying to gather everything, and the cops were letting them gather stuff. But there were things that were just left behind because, as one person told us, when you move into a shelter, you could only bring a certain amount of things. So sometimes that gets left behind. The actual tents that they were living out of, that usually has to get left behind. We know that the city did offer the same kind of shelter to folks living in other tents or tent encampments across the city. They haven't cleared it out in the way that they did the Des Plaines and Roosevelt, but that is a question that I had for the city, in particular because this summer we saw that the Supreme Court ruled that cities basically can enforce a ban on people sleeping on the streets. So that's been a big question. So far, the mayor's, Brandon Johnson's administration has said, they're not going to go that far and they're not going to do a ban or anything like that. But here in Chicago, this year in particular, we saw a ginormous jump in the number of people who are considered homeless. And that's by the city's estimate, which among groups that do this type of work, that's the most conservative estimate. So if that estimate is saying that there's been a huge increase, then the need is really there and a lot of folks are really hurting.
Mm-hmm. Some of our colleagues over at Block Club Chicago pointed out even back in July that this vicious cycle, even in a situation where individuals were being offered temporary residency at the Tremont. As they looked further into it, people who were staying at the Tremont were told they were kicked out to make room and sort of sent back out into a situation where they're unhoused on the streets of Chicago, but a place that maybe a tent encampment they may have stayed at has now been blocked off. And so it really creates this vicious cycle where we already know the amount of people living in homeless shelters are vulnerable to being evicted. We know that people in Chicago's migrant and asylum seeking community are staying inside of temporary living facilities, have faced eviction in the last few months. I wonder what this approach looks like moving forward. But Elvia, I appreciate you so much for all the work you've been doing the last few months to follow this.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Back to school often means going back to the doctor's office, and there are many types of appointments that are essential to your child's well-being. And if you have a student that is starting, let's say, the second grade, like my niece, then they are most likely due for their first orthodontic visit. Now, often it can be very stressful trying to find the proper time, funds, and doctors for the various appointments. For orthodontia, orthodontic experts is where the best value, quality, and accessibility align. They provide exceptional orthodontic care with various options, including traditional metal, gold, ceramic, and lingual braces and clear aligners. They also accept most major insurances and even create personal payment plans. Furthermore, they provide evening and weekend availability that will easily fit into your busy back to school schedule. And the best part is that they are always located conveniently near you. So why wonder? Find out if orthodontic treatment is right for your child now with a no-cost consultation. Ellery, I want to bring you in here. Earlier this week, a group of uncommitted delegates staged a sit-in while calling for a Palestinian American speaker or Palestinian speaker at the DNC on Wednesday night. They sat cross-legged on the sidewalk peacefully with a banner that said "Arms Embargo Now." Could you catch us up and let us know what happened on Wednesday and going into Thursday?
Yeah, I think while we're taping this, there's still sit-in is still going on outside of the United Center. It's a group of uncommitted delegates. I think one of the leaders is from Michigan, where there's a large Palestinian American population outside of near Dearborn, where there was a movement to vote uncommitted during the primaries. And so these delegates are coming into the convention not necessarily being tied to Harris. So that hence the term uncommitted delegates. They started doing a sit-in around 8:30 outside the United Center as speeches were going on inside the United Center, asking for, a Palestinian American speaker at the DNC. We saw the family of an Israeli hostage who has ties to Chicago speak. And ironically, that was going on at the same time. There was this pro-Palestinian protest going on outside in Union Park. The group of uncommitted delegates has gotten a lot of support from progressive legislators, progressive representatives in Congress. They're asking for a Palestinian American speaker. The Harris campaign sounds like they say that the Harris campaign's offered them a private meeting, but they want an actual speaker on stage. But they also are asking for an arms embargo to Israel, so that asking for the U.S. government to stop selling arms to Israel.
As you talk to members of uncommitted delegates, if they don't get a speaker at the DNC, well, what did they say their next point of action is?
That's not entirely clear to me at this moment. I think there is this huge protest movement going on around the DNC. We've seen thousands of people show up. We've also seen Chicago dissenters and other groups have been organizing DNC counter-programming in Bridgeport and at Pilsen Community Books. So there's a lot of education and stuff and building of movements that are happening behind the scenes. And we've also seen quite a few direct actions, at the DNC. A group did a noise demonstration outside of Kamala Harris's hotel on the Mag Mile at 1 a.m., trying to wake her up. There were the maggots that were released at a breakfast buffet at a Mag Mile hotel yesterday. I think it'll be interesting to see where that direct action energy goes. How are they going to continue to escalate, or are they going to continue to escalate?
Mhm. I mean, you've been running the Chicago Sun-Times DNC group chat for the last couple of weeks. I mean, for listeners who may not know exactly what the group chat is, could you tell us, what has it been like trying to, keep that churning all week? And what is maybe the most interesting thing you've learned as you've been covering it?
I think there are a lot of people in Chicago who trust, the Chicago Sun-Times for the Chicago Sun-Times, but there are also lots of people who don't trust this, legacy media brands. And our hope here was to help them build a personal relationship to the newsroom. So I have been sending out these texts. A lot of times I am trying to respond to as many people who reply to me as possible. I've gotten several hundred texts. I've sent several hundred texts. I'm not a big texter usually, trying to respond to, dozens of texts a day. The idea here is we're trying to build people's personal connection with the newsroom in this situation where we knew coming in it was going to be tense, and it's been very surprising to see, the things that people are sending back to me. We've definitely gotten some tips out of this group chat, the one-on-one connections I've been building with people. I think people are really longing for that connection to the news,
Hmm.
to feel I to understand that connection to themselves, and I think this has been one way to get that, especially in something that's in this big DNC media circus. There's so much noise. There's so much out of town media that's in here.
Yeah.
I was listening to some out of town media just calling the Green Line during yesterday's protest, calling the Green Line the Metro.
The small annoyances.
It was a small thing. I was like, come on, that's the L. That's the L. Um, and yeah, I want people to be able to find the news that knows what the L is and what the
Hmm.
metric is.
I love how much importance you put on finding and covering the stories that are outside the easy stories, right? We've been watching all week, people fawning over the Obama speeches while Chance is on Stephen Colbert saying, hey, we need a CBA, Barry. We need a CBA, right? We've watched people do the Walls and the Harris reels and, cover the small businesses and the vendors. But like you said, sparsing out the nuance taking place outside has been difficult this week, but such of critical importance. At Elvia, heading into the DNC, one of the talking points we kept hearing over and over was this is going to benefit the near and far west side. It's going to benefit residents. It's going to benefit small businesses and commercial corridors. And as we start listening to these small businesses and neighbors, especially when we get further and further west, when we get out to Garfield Park and North Lawndale and Austin, did they feel the DNC economic bump that was promised?
Yeah, my coworker Lauren Fitzpatrick, she went along Madison and was trying to figure that out. And it did not seem, I mean, like they had been getting a huge bump. I think people were hopeful. She talked to one person, Victoria Davis, who she's, selling stuff from a smoke pit, I think. But yeah, she was selling turkey tips and smothered cabbage. But she said that she thought that maybe people would come from the DNC, but she hadn't really seen that much traffic. We went to MacArthur's restaurant that's also on Madison. And I think they were also hopeful that they would get ginormous catering orders, but they had gotten a couple for watch parties, but nothing from the official DNC. So I think there was a little bit of a kind of hopeful, but it hadn't quite come to fruition that they would get this huge boom. As far as for the residents, my coworker David Struett, he was out there yesterday talking to folks who live in the Henry Horner homes, which is pretty much this is all happening in their backyard.
They're inside of the perimeter,
Yes.
essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people, they took the whole week off from work just because it was going to be such a hassle. So they have just been kind of hunkering down. Reading this kind of seems like it's someone preparing for a hurricane or for a huge snowstorm, like talking about like stocking up on food so you don't have to worry about going to the grocery store, taking off from work so you don't have to worry about if your bus is going to be on time. They did say that the city made some cosmetic upgrades to the area. Like, for example, they put like flower pots on the poles and things like that. But I think that would be one thing to kind of check on and keep track of, is if there is any more long-term changes for folks that live in this area.
They love doing the flower pot beautification near major events. I mean, from both of y'all, that promise of major events that inconvenience the city, whether it's Lala or NASCAR or the DNC, reaping economic benefits. It feels like time and time again, those numbers are never what was promised up front when these deals were signed, largely outside of the public sphere. And now you got Governor J.B. Pritzker sitting down like, oh, bring it back to Chicago in 2028. Slow your roll, Brody.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that the people who are at least selling the shirts or merch, like maybe they made a lot of money. Like, hopefully.
Hey, merch dudes gonna get their bread regardless.
Yeah, hopefully they're out there hustling and they made it work for themselves. But I do think this is kind of why in recent years in particular, we've seen a more pushback from residents. Like, I'm thinking particularly of people who live like in Little Village and Lawndale who have pushed back about Riot Fest, saying that it does not bring enough like economic opportunities and it doesn't outweigh them losing this space. But I think that's one thing that we'll hopefully keep tracking and seeing what residents think or should happen.
Ellery, before we close this out, this week, the economy for Chicago visitor guides, for restaurants to check out, for places to visit. I mean, we participated in it, and I stand by them in the sense that we tried to get people further away from the DNC, get out into the South Side, take yourself into the far West Side, into North Lawndale, get into Inglewood, get into Pullman. You know, as you're hearing back from, people in the group chat, are people looking for those things? Were people, wanting that? Or, were we always set up for a situation where we come to the end and again, we're just looking at those resources go where they typically go. Those visitors go where they typically go.
Yeah, I think this is a brilliant and very important point. I have not seen like a lot of people getting out of that sphere because, this is the thing is like the DNC is this self-contained ecosystem. Like I have been out. I've been out every night at 1 a.m. in the Loop after leaving Navy Pier after work, and I see all these delegates. They have their own buses, they have their own shuttles. They're going to they're all going to these highly organized after parties. I got an invite as a member of the media to a media party on Saturday night. That had thousands of journalists, but it was at Navy Pier, and sure, there was like this curated like experience of Chicago. They had hot dogs there, and stuff like that. But this is all at Navy Pier. And when people ask me about Navy Pier when they're visiting Chicago, I'm like, well, that's a thing you could do, sure. That's not the experience of the city. And, for the small businesses who have been tapped to do catering and stuff for the DNC, I think this has been a boon for them. Struggle Beard, which is in Harbor Courts in Hyde Park, got a big catering order for a DNC party.
Great small bakery.
Yeah, which is great for them. I love those cookies, but like, is that distributing, like, is it really impacting everyone? I'm not seeing delegates down here in Hyde Park. I'm seeing them go to watch parties at like Mag Mile hotels. There'll be I ran across one delegation doing a party at Harry Carey's on Navy Pier on Tuesday nights. I'm like, is this benefiting everyone in Chicago, or is it just benefiting these certain groups that always get benefits?
Every single week, a CityCast Chicago ends the same way. me begging you to come back for the next episode. Like, seriously, for the last 860 episodes, all I want is for you to come back for the next one. But one of the ways I convince you to do that is I finish every episode with some good news. This is something amazing happening in our guest life, something they want you to check out this weekend, an event across the city, a good news story they read. Elvia, what is that good news for you?
Yeah, WBZ did a story earlier this month featuring Talia Hall and the history of it. And there's going to be a free event tomorrow where basically you could go in for free. I mean, they are going to have like musical acts, a drag show, an art market. But it's also an opportunity if you're kind of like a architecture nerd to just be able to go in and wander around without like having to buy anything because it's free. So I think that's kind of cool. I love seeing like all the different buildings in Chicago, and I'm also live in Pilsen, so I'm a Pilsen stan.
I literally was just saying to Simone, our executive producer, a couple of weeks ago, that I didn't realize that Talia Hall was built in the 1890s. For some reason, it just escaped me how old this building was. And I've been there for tons of concerts. I still haven't checked out Marisco San Pedro's, the new restaurant that replaced Do Sex in Talia Hall. I love Punch House in the basement. And so I'm a big fan of Talia Hall. We will drop a link in the show notes to the event that people can check out. Definitely a gym. Definitely a gym. So many different things to do under one roof.
Yeah, definitely. And that WBZ story kind of explains the history of like basically when it started and like to now now it's like completely different than what it originally started at. But it also kind of shows like the history of like migration and like different ways of people like living in that neighborhood and how it's changed.
Ellery, over to you. What is your some good news? Oh, man, I'm feeling good with this today. I'm not gonna lie. I think I'm hitting it today. I don't know about y'all. I'm feeling good about it.
You're 100% hitting all the right notes.
Come on, I be fishing and y'all be helping. I appreciate it. What's your good news for the CityCast listeners?
I have been so immersed in the DNC coverage. Like, I have not thought beyond breakfast tomorrow, like what I am going to do with my life. Like, I have books that are due at the library, and I guess like my good news. I think this is my perennial good news. Is I'm a trans woman. I came to Chicago 3 years ago. Very much coming from Virginia. I was desperate for like community spaces, and I've really found that in Chicago. There are lots of great events that are going on that people have been organizing recently for trans people specifically. And I'm definitely looking forward to like being around community this weekend, especially after doing this whole DNC coverage. I think trans people have been mentioned twice on the DNC stage. Like the word trans has been said about twice the whole week, which is, really heartening to see as somebody who is nervous about the discourse around trans people in this country.
The growing anti-trans laws that we're seeing passed every single day. And the conversation feels to be getting more and more reductive.
Yeah. So, it's been very... I would have liked to hear more from the DNC about that. There's very few trans people who are covering the DNC. And so I'm going to be very much leaning this weekend and going forward on like my trans community in Chicago. Getting a little bit of a reality check too from the DNC media circus. It was a circus. It was a traveling circus that came into town. I feel like I've been in the tent for a week, and they've got like animals doing weird little tricks. And now I need to like go leave the tent and remember, what's really important to me.
No, I really appreciate you taking space and making time. I appreciate the work that both of y'all have been doing and the stories that y'all have worked on. Before we get out of here, my good news, tomorrow from 1 to 8 p.m., you can stop by the DuSable Museum in Washington Park for Dig In Day. They're going to have live music with hip hop legends like The Clips, newcomer Caribou going to be out there, not the two. They're going to have food from Lexington Betty's Smokehouse, Justice of the Pies, and so many other great options. And the best part It's all free. Check the link in our show notes. There you are going to find links to all of the stories we talked about, and you'll find links to both of these amazing, amazing voices in Chicago to see all of the work that they're doing. I want to give another huge thank you to this duo from the Sun-Times, reporter Elvia Malagon. Elvia, thank you for making time for us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great. And I love your singing voice.
Oh, man. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And to audience engagement specialist and somebody who's been running the most popular group chat in the city this week, Ellery Jones, thank you for making time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Before I let you go, I got to give a huge thank you to the people who make CityCast Chicago possible. That's our executive producer, Simone Alicea. Our producer is Michelle Navarro. Our Hey Chicago newsletter editor is Sydney Madden. The music we all love is from Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. And my last thank you is for you, the people who listen to CityCast Chicago. Whether you listen every day, whether you listen once a week, whether you listen on 1-time speed, 2-time speed, whether you have shared us with your friends and family or not, whether you have rated the show and left a review or not, I'd prefer you do those last two things. But hey, whatever capacity you have to engage us, I appreciate it. One more request, just one more favor. Be back at bright and early on Monday. I'm gonna be here. Hopefully you will be too. Peace.